to remember that there are people for whom this is not available, and that food abundance is something that is true for a slice of America and not for everyone.
Every Sunday, millions enjoy juicy pork without thinking twice. Yet for Jews and Muslims, pork is strictly forbidden. Why does one simple animal cause such strict rules and devotion across many years? The answer is found in old texts, religious laws, and cultural battles that shaped whole communities. From the deserts of the Middle East to kitchens around the world today, the pig became a strong symbol of faith, obedience, and identity. But if this animal has been so avoided and feared for thousands of years, why do Christians eat it freely? What explains this big difference? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. The reason Jews and Muslims do not eat pork, but Christians do. People have known that living together needs and requires rules since the beginning of human history. Instinct alone was not enough for early communities to survive. People needed created and made rules to prevent or stop conflict and misunderstanding as they learnt to share resources including land, food, shelter, and duties. These guidelines and rules created a sense of community and helped define the right behavior. These rules shaped into moral, cultural, and religious systems over time. These systems were viewed and seen in many communities as guidelines or instructions from a higher force that were meant to lead people towards stability, order, and purpose in their everyday lives rather than as just human concepts. Within the Hebrew tradition, this idea of divine order is clearly seen in the laws found in the Old Testament. One of the most well-known of these laws is the prohibition against eating pork. This rule appears clearly in the book of Leviticus, where animals are divided into clean and unclean categories. The pig is listed as unclean because although it has split hooves, it does not chew the cud. Because of this, the Israelites were commanded not to eat its meat and not even touch its dead body. The language of this command is firm and direct, showing that it was meant to be followed without argument or exception. It was not advice, but a binding rule connected to Israel's covenant with God. The pig was not labeled unclean only because of physical traits. It also carried strong symbolic meaning in the ancient world. Pigs were known to eat scraps, waste, and decaying matter. This behavior caused them to be linked with dirt, disorder, and impurity. In a religious system that focused strongly on holiness and separation from what was considered defiled, the pig became a powerful symbol of what did not fit with God's standards. The ban on pork therefore went beyond food. It taught spiritual lessons about discipline, purity, and obedience. Dietary laws like this played an important role in shaping the identity of the people of Israel. Every meal became a reminder of who they were and who they served. By following these rules daily, they showed their loyalty to the covenant they shared with God. These practices made them different from surrounding nations and helped protect their unique identity. Faith was not limited to prayer or worship rituals. It entered everyday life through ordinary actions like eating. Over time, these habits shaped their thinking, strengthened community bonds, and passed values from one generation to the next. It is important to understand that these dietary laws were never meant to apply to everyone. The Bible makes it clear that they were given specifically to Israel. Foreigners living among them were not required to follow the same rules. This shows that the laws were signs of Israel's special calling rather than universal moral commands. Their purpose was to shape Israel's identity, not to control the behavior of all people. The laws helped Israel understand their role and responsibility without forcing the same standards on others. As history moved forward, the prohibition of pork became one of the strongest symbols of Jewish identity. Even during times of exile, hardship, and persecution, many Jewish communities continued to follow these food laws. Holding on to them became a quiet way of resisting pressure to give up their faith and culture. When outside forces tried to clear off and remove their customs, these practices helped maintain and keep harmony, peace, and remembrance. Refusing to give up on these rules and guidelines turned into an act of strong will, loyalty, and faith that helped Jewish identity stand tall for millennia. A different interpretation and explanation of these dietary guidelines was eventually introduced by Christianity. Regardless of the Jewish origins of the early Christians, Christian beliefs in the end placed a strong emphasis on breaking ceremonial restrictions. But this independence was never meant or supposed to promote or encourage laziness or ignorance. Christian leaders, especially the Apostle Paul, preached that freedom must be governed or covered by duty and love. Believers were urged and encouraged to think about how their behavior impacted and affected other people. Even if something was allowed, it ought not to harm someone else's beliefs or damage social peace. Christianity thus replaced an ethical emphasis on maturity, care, and spiritual duty for rigid dietary regulations. To put this simply, these ideas show how dietary rules and instructions can add to the growth of identity, order, and spiritual discipline in the olden days Israel. They were signs of a special covenant and bond rather than universal laws. They became potent representations of loyalty over time. How do faith and divine law influence our decisions about daily acts, such as what we eat and how we live in obedience to God? If humans struggle with moral choices about life and death, stay tuned for more. One God, three faiths, one animal, and different path. Although Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all worship one God and trace their roots back to Abraham, they developed different rules about food because they understand obedience, purity, and spiritual identity in different ways. At the center of this discussion is one long-standing question: why do Muslims strictly avoid pork while Christians generally eat it without concern? The answer is not mainly about taste or health. It is about how each faith understands God's commands and how believers are meant to live in obedience to Him. In Islam, the rule about pork is very clear and direct. Pork is forbidden, and this command applies to all Muslims, in every place and in every generation. It is not treated as symbolic or temporary. It is a firm instruction that shapes daily life. Because of this clarity, pork avoidance has remained consistent throughout Islamic history, regardless of culture or location. One of the most important ideas in Islam is submission to God. In fact, the word Islam itself means submission. From this viewpoint, obeying God's command is more important than fully understanding the reason behind it. When a Muslim avoids pork, they are showing trust, respect, and loyalty to God. This obedience is seen as a form of worship. It becomes a daily reminder that faith is lived out through actions, not just beliefs. Islam also places strong importance on purity. Certain things are considered spiritually unclean, and pork falls into this category. Avoiding it is connected to maintaining spiritual cleanliness, which affects prayer, worship, and daily religious practice. Because of this, pork is not just avoided for physical reasons, but also for spiritual, non-ones. The act of avoiding it supports discipline, self-control, and mindfulness of God in everyday life. Christianity, however, developed a different understanding over time, especially through the teachings of Jesus and the early Christian community. A major shift took place in how purity was understood. Instead of focusing on external rules, such as food laws, emphasis moved toward the inner condition of the heart. Moral thoughts, intentions, and actions became the main measure of holiness. This shift taught that wrongdoing does not come from what enters the body through food, but from what comes from within a person, such as harmful thoughts or behaviors. With this teaching, purity became more about inner character than outward practice. This idea laid the foundation for later Christian views on food and religious rules. This change became even clearer through a powerful spiritual experience involving one of Jesus' closest followers. In this experience, food was used as a symbol to teach a much larger lesson. The message was that people who were once considered outsiders were now included in God's plan. The focus was not really about food itself, but about removing barriers between groups of people. For many years, food laws helped separate different communities and kept clear social and religious boundaries in place. When these boundaries were challenged, it opened the door for people from many backgrounds to share the same faith. The idea was that faith was no longer limited by culture, ethnicity, or ritual practices. This moment played a major role in shaping how Christians came to understand freedom in matters of food. Later, Christian teachers explained this new view more clearly. They taught that food, by itself, is not morally good or bad. Eating certain foods does not make a person closer to God, and avoiding them does not earn spiritual favor. According to this teaching, earlier food rules served a purpose for a specific time. Once that purpose was fulfilled, those rules no longer defined a believer's relationship with God. Instead, faith, love, and spiritual transformation became the focus. While Christians were given freedom regarding food, they were also taught to use that freedom wisely. Respect for others and unity within the faith community were considered more important than personal choices about eating. Why do these same rules around food, like the prohibition of pork, change so drastically between religions? And what does that tell us about belief, culture, and human behavior? Let's find out. Faith on the plate. Understanding pork and religious identity. The rules about what people can and cannot eat have played an important role in human societies for thousands of years. In the ancient Middle East, pigs were not easy animals to raise. Unlike cows or goats, pigs required large amounts of water, did not provide milk or wool, and could not help with work such as plowing fields. They were also sensitive to heat, and their meat spoiled quickly. In hot climates without refrigeration, eating pork was risky because it could carry diseases like trichinosis, which could make people sick if the meat was undercooked. These practical dangers made pigs inefficient and unsafe as a main food source for early communities. Over time, what began as a survival rule turned into a sacred law. Pigs were labeled unclean, and avoiding their meat became part of religious practice. The enforcement of food rules in religion often goes beyond safety and becomes a way to strengthen group identity. For early Jewish and Muslim communities, avoiding pork was more than a health precaution. It marked membership in the group. Eating or refusing certain foods created a clear line between members of the community and outsiders. This distinction was important in societies where survival depended on cooperation and shared identity. A person who followed the dietary rules demonstrated loyalty to the community and obedience to divine command. The rules also helped maintain a sense of tradition and connection to ancestors who had followed them before. Even when the original dangers of pork became less relevant due to modern agriculture and cooking methods, the prohibition remained because it symbolized faithfulness and belonging. Food laws are also powerful because they link daily actions to moral and social expectations. Every time someone refused pork, it was a visible act showing that they were part of the religious group and committed to its teachings. The harder or more inconvenient the rule, the stronger the signal of loyalty. This is why following dietary rules can feel deeply meaningful. They are more than habits. They are markers of faith and identity. Over generations, what started as practical guidance became a sacred standard, preserved in texts and traditions. In this way, food rules act like membership tests that are difficult to ignore or bypass without signaling disobedience or separation from the community. Christianity, however, developed differently. While it began as a movement within Judaism, it quickly spread to a wider population. Early Christians faced communities where pork was common and everyday food. Strict dietary rules could have made the religion harder to adopt for new members. To allow wider acceptance, Christianity gradually abandoned the old food restrictions. This change helped Christianity spread rapidly because converts did not have to give up familiar foods or learn complex rituals to join the faith. Modern advancements in food safety, farming, and hygiene have removed many of the practical reasons behind the original prohibition. Pork can now be raised, prepared, and stored safely, and the risk of disease is minimal in most countries. Yet, for many Jews and Muslims, the ban persists as a tradition tied to religious identity. It is no longer primarily about danger or survival. It is about obedience, belonging, and maintaining a connection to generations past. The rule continues because it reinforces who people are within their faith communities. The persistence of food laws also highlights the role of religious authority in shaping behavior. Leaders often took natural observations, exaggerated risks, or cultural habits and framed them as absolute commands from God. This gave the rules moral and social weight, making them difficult to question. The rule still stands regardless of the shifting conditions because it stands for continuity, loyalty, and identity. Identity-related rules are especially long-lasting and still standing tall. Refusing some foods can last for generations, long after the initial and the first motivation is no longer relevant or important, after it becomes a part of what it means to be a part of a group. In summary, the fact that pork is forbidden in Islam and Judaism yet acceptable in Christianity shows how dietary regulations have several functions. Originally motivated by practical concerns and worries for health and survival, they grew and evolved into symbols of social identity, obedience, and faith. These instructions and rules promote loyalty, make communities stronger, and serve as steady reminders of cultural and religious uniqueness. Christianity's decision to lift the ban shows how rules and instructions may be changed to contain all growing communities. Modern practices show that even when practical reasons go away, the rules survive and stand tall because of the meaning, identity, and authority they carry. If dietary laws shaped the spiritual and social lives of entire communities, how did one particular animal, the pig, come to be both revered and rejected across different cultures and times? Let's learn more. The origins of the pork taboo in ancient societies. The history of pigs and humans shows a mix of practical, social, and cultural reasons that shaped how people ate in the ancient Near East. People have been eating pig meat for thousands of years, even before farming began. In the Paleolithic period, humans hunted wild boars as part of their survival. Later, during the Neolithic period, around 9700 BCE, humans began raising pigs. Pigs were a good source of food because they grew quickly, had many babies in a short time, and could fatten up fast. Within a year, a single pig could grow from a baby to ready for eating. Pigs were also easy to feed because they could eat almost anything, including food waste and human trash. This made them very helpful in cities, where garbage could spread disease. By eating waste, pigs also helped keep towns cleaner while growing into food at the same time. Even with these advantages, pigs became less popular over time because of social and economic reasons. During the early Bronze Age, pigs were common and even had a place in religious rituals. But as societies became more organized, pigs were less useful. Unlike cows, sheep, or goats, pigs did not provide milk, wool, or help with work. This made them less valuable for creating wealth or paying taxes. Pigs also did not fit well in large farms. Over time, pigs became associated with poorer people who lived in cities, while rich people and temples stopped raising them. This created a social stigma, meaning pigs were seen as animals for the lower classes. Religious practices also changed over time. Early on, pigs were used in temples and in sacrifices. Archaeological evidence from Sumerian cities like Uruk shows pigs being kept by temples and even sacrificed in pits as part of rituals. People believed pigs could take away pollution or bad luck. Eating garbage, which was once seen as helpful, may have been seen as a positive symbol in these rituals. But by the late Bronze Age, pigs began to be seen as dirty and unsuitable for religious offerings. Elite temples in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia stopped raising pigs around 1600 BCE. Pigs continued to be raised, but mostly by the poorer people, and they lost their earlier religious value. The dietary practices of the Israelites and their neighbors show how social and cultural factors influenced pig consumption. During the Iron Age Y, around 1200 BCE, archaeologists found big differences between the Israelites and the Philistines. Philistine cities, like Gath, had more pig bones, and pork made up about 13% of their diet. In Israelite towns, pigs were very rare, often only 1% or less of the total livestock. This shows that the Israelites avoided pork for practical reasons, like farming conditions, and also as part of their identity. Some scholars believe that by not eating pork, the Israelites distinguished themselves from the Philistines, who ate pork regularly. This made pork a cultural and ethnic marker. However, pig consumption among the Philistines was not the same everywhere. Some Philistine towns, like Telkassil, had almost no pigs. Still, the very low number of pigs in Israelite towns suggests that avoiding pork was becoming an important part of their culture and daily life. In short, pigs were useful to humans because they provided food and helped manage waste. But over time, economic, social, and religious changes made pigs less important. They were linked to poor people and city living, and temples no longer used them for rituals. By the time the Israelites appeared, pigs were rare and considered unsuitable for important social or religious roles. At the same time, neighbors like the Philistines ate more pork. This difference helped the Israelites form rules against pork and make it a symbol of who they were. Environmental, economic, social, and religious factors together created the early rules against eating pigs. These rules later became part of Israelite law and culture, showing how daily life, society, and belief systems worked together to shape food traditions. What do you think about the consumption of pork? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us as we explored why the pig became a forbidden food for Jews and Muslims. We hope you found this video both fascinating and eye-opening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to dive deeper into the mysteries of religious traditions. See you there.